Good afternoon and welcome back to the Weekly Wigz. I think I'm actually going to start every episode with just a fun little melody for you because that seems to be the trend as of late. But hey, welcome back, honeys. Episode 5 of the Weekly Wigz. Welcome back. I am your host, Megan Wigz, the mayor of Yap City. And today we are here to yap about a lot of things. She's had a week. She's had an interesting week. It's been my first week back to work after a little break. I started my new job this week, which, as some people will know if you've started a new job, can be a bit overwhelming, a bit tiring, a bit draining in all of the good and bad ways. And I, for the first time in like 5 to 6 years, have been back to an office schedule this week. Oh, girlies, and that really is going to be the crux of what we talk about today, because we need to do this pandemic deep dive, which I've been hinting at for a while. And I was like thinking about it quite a lot this week because I've been having days in an office which is so out of my norm. But one time in life, that was the norm. So crazy stuff. I'm not in the office like 5 days a week, thank God, because I don't think anyone could be doing that these days post-pandemic. But I'm like 1 to 2 days a week. I felt like little Miss Anne Hathaway in The Devil Wears Prada this week. And I was just envisioning Katie Tunstall's Suddenly I See on my little tram as I see the city skyscrapers and I'm walking across with my bag over to my corporate office. I was like, who is she on a lunch hour with all business people around me in suits? Oh my God. So I've been living the fantasy, girly in the big city office life. And it's been just so long, like I said, since I've done that. So it was a bit of a strange feeling, but kind of exhilarating at the same time to be back amongst humans. I was like, oh, this is what it's like to interact with colleagues. So, yeah, so that's been your gal's week. It's been a little bit tiring. It's always just a lot of energy, isn't it, on first week jobs? You're meeting so many people. You have to take in like all the training and all the things. So I've been a little bloody tired this week and we're PMSing, so that doesn't help. But we're back into full swing. It's weekend vibes. I'm actually recording this on a Saturday. I don't usually record it on a Saturday, but tomorrow is actually Remembrance Sunday and there's a Remembrance Sunday sort of ceremony happening in Manchester tomorrow. So I probably won't get much time to record tomorrow, so that's why I'm doing it earlier. But we've obviously just had bonfire night passes over this last week. Bonfire night, Halloween. This is just the season, isn't it? It's the season of madness. It's when people are just so busy with all of the festivities going on in the lead up to Christmas. I don't mind it, don't mind the festivities. But after a while, it does get a bit tiring. I'm just like, all the noise, all the people. I'm just a granny, leave me be. Some other current affairs stuff to have a little chat through on today's ep. We've got Grammy nominations that came out yesterday in music news. Let me do a little run through. I haven't had a full look at the full list. I've seen some of the main ones. So who have we got this year? We've got Album of the Year. Now these are kind of the big ones towards the end of the show. Album of the Year. We've got Bad Bunny. I don't know that album. Justin Bieber's new album, Swag. I'm going to be honest, I wasn't a big lover of that album. I listened through to it all. There was a few good songs in it. I do like Yukon. That's a really great song. Do I think that deserves Album of the Year? No, but that's just my opinion. Sabrina Carpenter, Man's Best Friend. I've not listened to that album, but Man Child, which is a great song, is on that album. Clips, Pusha T and Malice. I've never heard of them. I think they're US rappers. Mayhem by Lady Gaga. Oh, I'm sorry, that is my album of the year. Do we even need to get into that discussion? It's fucking Lady Gaga, come on. And Mayhem is a great album. She really went back to like her OG pop roots in this album, which I loved. I mean, Abracadabra, come on. I love Shadow of a Man and I love Garden of Eden. There's some really great songs on Mayhem. That's personally my winner. GNX, Kendrick Lamar. I'm not really a Kendrick Lamar person. Met by Leon Thomas. Never heard of him. Tyler, the Creator, Chromacopia. I did like Sticky from that album. That's a good song, but I'd not listened to that album before. So quite a lot of rap, actually, in the album of the year. That's like 3 different rap albums, which is actually quite rare for the Grammys to put rap and hip-hop music on so much. So that's pretty cool. Me, personally, it's always going to be Lady Gaga. I personally think Tate McRae should be up there. Her album So Close to What is fire, and she's having a stellar run on her tour. That album is amazing. That's definitely her strongest album yet. I feel like she deserves her flowers, so I think she definitely got snubbed there. Then moving on, we've got Song of the Year. which is Abracadabra, Lady Gaga. Oh, absolutely. When that song came out, we lost our minds. Come on, the cultural impact of that song was sensational. The music video is such a catchy song. It's an amazing pop song. So, yeah, Abracadabra. I haven't even read through the other ones yet, but Abracadabra is already the winner for me. What we got next? Anxiety by Doechii. That's a really good song. Apate, Apate, Apate by Rose and Bruno Mars. That is a good pop song. DTMF by Bad Bunny. I don't know that song. Golden from the K-pop Demon Hunters. K-pop Demon Hunters was very culturally huge, wasn't it, this last year? I'm going to be controversial and say I didn't get the hype. I did watch it very late to the party, but I did eventually watch it. And it was a great fun film, and I can see why kids will absolutely love that film. And the songs were really catchy, but I don't know why it got that much attention. It wasn't that amazing. But I will say that Golden song is a great song. The female singers on that track are amazing vocalists. So for that alone, I'm glad they've had a nom. Who else we got? Luther by Kendrick Lamar and SZA. I don't know that song. Man Child by Sabrina Carpenter. That is a good one. Wildflower by Billie Eilish. Okay, it's an interesting mix of songs. Again, I stand on the fact that Abracadabra is Song of the Year personally. I hope Lady Gaga has a sweeping night of awards. I think she deserves it. I really hope she performs as well. Oh, that'd be so sick if she performs Abracadabra at the Grammys. Or like maybe she'll do like a medley of the Mayhem Ball stuff. So, okay, interesting. What else we got here? We got Best New Artist. Olivia Dean, Cat's Eye, The Marias, Addison Rae, Somber, Leon Thomas, Alex Warren and Lola Young. I don't know all of them. I've heard many of those names. I'm aware of most of them. I do like a bit of Cat's Eye. I don't think they've made that much of an impact just yet, though, in terms of their releases. They've only really got 2 big songs out, which is Gabriella and Gnarly. I think they've got a little way to go yet, though. I have no idea who the Marias or Leon Thomas is. Alex Warren's done pretty well for himself. I think if I was to pick from that list, I would personally go with Lola Young. I think she's had the most impact. She's had some good bops. I mean, Messy is a great song. She really took over that one. Okay, there's quite a lot to go through there. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and go through every single Grammy noms because there's like thousands of bloody categories for the Grammys, but when are the actual Grammys? Grammys 2026 date. The 1st of February next year. Okay, we'll keep our eyes out. We'll probably have a little Grammys recap episode later next year. And we'll do a run through of whoever ends up winning. So there we are. That's our recap on life admin, life updates and music updates and all the current updates. I'm going to do my little deep dive now into the pandemic. I know there's not really any fun way of segueing that, but this is where we are. Obviously, as I mentioned earlier on, I'd been thinking about it a bit this week because of my re-entry into office life. And I've been having conversations with colleagues this week about God, yeah, what a time that was, isn't it? Can you believe that was real and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, yeah, I need to do this topic this week because honestly, what a time. How is that real? I know we probably all say this all the time and we say it so throwaway, don't we? Oh yeah, I remember the pandemic. But no, really, do you remember the pandemic? Because now that I sit here and think about it, some of it feels like a true fever dream blur. Because what do you mean we were just locked in our houses for months on end? I'm going to go back to my story and my experience of my pandemic, okay? We got lots of segments to work through here today. And I do just want to preface this by saying, whilst I will probably be having jovial, comedic conversations about all my stories and experiences, I'm aware that the pandemic is obviously a very sensitive thing for lots of people. And it was a very serious moment in our life's history, of course. That goes without saying. And obviously, so many people across the globe were impacted in a very serious way, whether that was for your own health or whether that was losing a loved one. And me and my family were also impacted in that way. My grandpa passed away very early into the pandemic because he was in a care home and he was sadly one of those earliest statistics. And I just want to make it clear that I'm not trying to be insensitive to the actual horrible experiences of the pandemic that quite a lot of us will have gone through. But obviously I don't want it to be some sad, depressing episode about all the bad things that the pandemic brought us, because otherwise this would not make for great listening, really. But, just to make it clear that I'm very much empathetic and understanding to the fact that the pandemic, whilst we sit here and go, oh my God, what a crazy time, it was actually also a really awful time and a really sad time for many people. And I didn't like sitting through a pandemic-style funeral for my poor Grampy. No, I did not. It was really awful. And that was my first ever experience of a funeral, which was even crazier. But you know what? These are experiences that we've all had. I'm sure many of us can relate. But of course, to get us through the sad times and the trauma of it all, we have to bring a bit of light relief to the table too. And just that's how I personally choose to approach life. And just when you look back and you just think, what a time. It feels like that was not a real lived experience, but it actually was. So obviously we're going back now, 5, coming up to 6 years actually. Oh my God, nearly 6 years since the global pandemic. That is pretty crazy. Didn't it officially start in February? Am I making that up? Let me actually verify that. Official date of global pandemic. Okay, the World Health Organization declared the outbreak a public health emergency of international concern on the 30th of January 2020. But I think that was only in some places, wasn't it? It didn't become super serious in the UK, I don't think until March. Now, obviously, this timeline and this stories and all these things I'm about to say, these could be slightly inaccurate because obviously it was so long ago. I don't remember the specific dates of every single thing, but it's just what I'm going off in my memory of what I recall. And my earliest memory of anything related to pandemic was February 2020 because I'd gone on a trip to visit my friend Josie. Shout out Josie. Anyway, so it was 2020, February, had gone on a trip to see her in Barcelona, and I'd actually travelled from Heathrow. And I think at the time in the news, there was a lot of chatter about COVID-19, but it was mainly what was happening in China because it kind of all began there, didn't it? And I remember looking around the airport and seeing some people all in masks, and I was just thinking, what's going on here? Why are people wearing masks in the UK? This is only something that's happening in China. What's the big problem? And at the time, obviously, and I'm sure we all acted this way, we just thought, what's the big deal? Why is everyone getting their knickers in a twist? And I think this is when certain conversations started happening around big, large events and cancelling sports games and all this stuff, right? And obviously, I was travelling. And at that time, there was no measurements in place. Everyone was allowed to travel as normal. There was no such rules as masks at those times. I just think people were personally choosing to wear masks because they'd seen some stuff on the news. But really was not thinking anything in the back of my mind about any of this at the time. So I go to Barcelona. I'm having the time of my life. I remember that trip being so fun because I think it was actually the first time I'd gone to Barcelona to see my friend and first time to Barcelona period. So I was excited, living my best life as a little tourist as well. And, we're just living a normal life out there, going to restaurants, having fun. And this is actually a time in my life where I feel so full of enthusiasm and dreams. And if you listen back to a few episodes ago, I was talking about the stage of life of going through different jobs, right? And this was a time in life. I'd been in my flat in Cardiff for about a year or so when I was enjoying my time, but I was feeling kind of adventurous. I was like, yeah, do you know what? I've been working all these call centres and all these random jobs for years. It's time for a change. It's time to do something exciting and big. And I don't know what that's going to be. I don't know whether that's going to be something in Cardiff or maybe it's a job thing that will change. I don't know. But I felt something in the air. And that Barcelona trip really brought that out of me because I obviously felt so proud of my friend because she had moved from Cardiff to Barcelona and to see her life there. And I was like, this is amazing. And I felt so inspired by that. And so I came away from that trip, coming back home, just full of life, full of enthusiasm, as if I was on the precipice of change. And then, I'm not even joking you, 2 weeks later, my friend actually was then coming back to Cardiff anyway. I think maybe she was visiting her family for something. And I had surprised her with tickets to go and see the Wales rugby match that was going to be on when she was there. And we were just going to have a little day together, really excited. I bought the tickets really last minute. I can literally remember being in the office that I used to work in and ordering them on some resale website, low-key kind of freaking out thinking, will they be scam tickets? And it was one of those annoying things where waiting for the delivery for the tickets was taking really long, and I was on edge thinking, but I need to surprise her and she doesn't know, and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, that was a whole thing. And then literally finally get the tickets, made all these arrangements. I think I'd messaged or FaceTime Josie to surprise her and give her like at least advance warning that like, hey, so like I'm taking you here on Saturday, because she was going to have a suitcase and we were going to have to figure out all these logistics. And then I'm not joking you, I think it must have been like the day before she was travelling. I can remember being in work on the Friday. The game was due to be on the Saturday. And I think there was a lot of talk in the news about the potential cancellation of this rugby match. Because I think like in the week leading up to it, a few other sports events across the UK had been called off. And I remember thinking, oh no, like I've only literally just bought tickets for this. Like my friends come in, it's a whole thing. Surely not, like surely not. And they even made an announcement that like, no, we're not planning on cancelling this. Like, what are you talking about? And then I swear to God, not even within like a few hours of all that chitter-chatter, it officially got announced that it was being cancelled. I was like, no! I was obviously so devastated. All the effort I'd gone through to source those tickets, getting so excited obviously for my friend to come and visit, and we had all these plans. And then it was like, oh, what a shitter. So we're obviously a bit devastated, but we still meet up anyway. We go for some food because things are still operating as normal at this time. And that's obviously what made the decision around the rugby match confusing, because it was like, well, what's the point of cancelling that match? But then there's thousands and hundreds of people walking out in town amongst each other, so what's that all about? So we're sat there in one of the restaurants in town, and I'm going to have to maybe insert the picture here, or it was either a video or a picture. I'll pop it in the screen here. But we were sat there, and down walks the street a group of like 5 men, clearly on some kind of stag do, and they're dressed as Corona beer bottles. Obviously, at the time, you think that's hilarious. You're like, coronavirus, what? And this just clearly depicts how unserious we all took it as a nation. Like, there's blokes dressed as Corona bottles, fancy dress. Like, what do you mean? So, I mean, you know, a couple days have probably passed now since then. And it must have been like end of Feb. And this is where I think we were approaching March. And I wish I could remember the timeline, but I really don't think it was very long after that Saturday. It might well have been the week after. And that is when I think the UK government and Boris Johnson like officially declared the pandemic here and confirmed that like, hey, shit's got serious. And that's when things really took a turn, wasn't it? So at this point, obviously in terms of work, I'm thinking, well, how is this going to work? Is there a contingency plan? Obviously no one had contingency plans in any part of the world because like, oh, we've never done this before, so what do we do? So I'm pretty sure it would have been in the office probably on the Monday. And was that, I mean, do you know what? Let me actually check. When did the UK enter the pandemic dates? Oh, here we go. National lockdown was introduced on the 23rd of March 2020 in the UK. So, God, when it's really hard, isn't it, to remember like when things happen. But either way, I guess it doesn't really matter. So there would have been a very brief period of time where I think we were still in the office and there was obviously all these rumblings of like, oh, we might be going into lockdown. Oh, we might need to think of a plan. And there was like no time to make these plans. I can't imagine what big bosses in workplaces must have been thinking at that time of like, what the fuck? Like, how are we going to turn our operations to remote all of a sudden when, let's be real, the majority of workplaces up until that point have always operated in person, in offices. And during this time, this might have been, I'm assuming this must have been after the announcement of the lockdown or just in the run-up to it. I can recall receiving a letter. I actually have the letter. I can't find it right now because it's rummaged amongst a bunch of drawers, but I actually still have a letter that I received in the post from 10 Downing Street with the 10 Downing Street letterheads and signed by Boris Johnson, the then Prime Minister, like announcing what was happening. It's crazy that they sent that out in the post to people. I'm not sure if everyone in the UK got that, but I got it. And I remember being flabbergasted when I received that. I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. Like, this feels like I'm in war times. Like, what do you mean I've got a letter in my letterbox from the Prime Minister? It's like, this is kind of scary. So this is where I can recall things feeling very strange. And it did happen just so rapidly, didn't it? I think what happened in my workplace is that we had some kind of team meeting, maybe say on a Wednesday of that week. And there was all this discussions around like, there may have to be contingency plans and like, this is what's likely to happen. And we might have to ask you to work from home for a little bit. Then that's just what happened. They just sent us home. There was like a little bit of crossover in the offices between teams of like who could come in at certain times to collect their laptops. And like for the first time ever, we were all being given laptops, which had never happened before. So, oh my God, the poor IT department at that time were probably thinking, we need to scramble like 1,000 laptops for this company. And in fairness, they did it rapidly. Like hats off to most of these companies because that was no mean feat to do such a quick turnaround to get all that equipment for people. And not only to get the equipment, but to make sure that it was even set up correctly. I think for the first week or so, while I waited for a work laptop, I was actually using my personal MacBook that I had at the time. I couldn't really do much on it because it didn't have like all the programs and all the functions, but it was like a semi-workable solution while I waited for an official one. What's crazy to think is like there was actually a time where I didn't even know this and none of us knew that when we were going into the office and collecting our laptops, that was really the last time we were ever going to work in an office for such a long time. Or like for some people, ever. And that's just like a wild concept to think now, isn't it? I think in most of our heads, we just thought, oh, maybe this will just be a couple of weeks, at most a few months, and then we'll just be back to normal schedule. And obviously how the times turned, eh? So here we are. At this point, it is round about mid-March, coming towards the end of March from my memory. We've been sent home from work. I've now got an official laptop. I think at this point, we'd received the letters to say, hey girlies, it's lockdown time. And I think, honestly, for most people who can probably relate, this was certainly my experience. This was a period of time where I felt a lot of adrenaline running me through what we were going through. There was almost like, I know this sounds like really weird to say, but there was almost like an excitement to it for me because it was so new and we'd never experienced this before. And I'm receiving letters from Downing Street. There was like, I think it's probably truthfully this denial thing that you just think, no, this is like a movie. This doesn't happen. And like, don't get me wrong, there's an element of it as well where I think I felt semi-excited that I could work from home. And I was like, oh, I get to have lie-ins and I don't have to wake up and commute to work anymore. So there was obviously plus sides to it in a sense. And I recall the weather being so nice at that time. And these beginning stages, I think, for a lot of people, it almost felt like some people were going off on a holiday. I mean, obviously, some people were being furloughed, which at the time, I could imagine at first people might have been thinking, oh, well, I'm probably just getting paid and I don't have to do anything. I can just chill at home. But then obviously the reality of that in time to come was pretty grim. I personally was lucky that I never got furloughed. I never had to worry about my job, which I was really thankful for, because I know that wasn't necessarily the case for some. I was still getting paid full time, and actually, for a very brief period of time, I was getting paid full time to work like a half day. They called it like condensed hours. And I think it was just this temporary arrangement that they'd set up for us whilst they essentially figured out what the hell they were going to do. Because bear in mind, I came from a job where I was doing events coordination, and obviously during the pandemic, there was no face-to-face events happening. So in my particular department, there was obviously a lot of up-in-the-air questions about how are we going to function as a team if we have no events to book. So I think during this interim period for me, I was put on these condensed hours, which at the time I thought was great. I had to work 10 till 12. Then I got a 2-hour lunch break. Then it was 2 till 4, and that was my entire day. You can imagine I'm thrilled at this because I'm thinking, I don't have to work a full day. The sun is shining. I get my one permitted walk a day. I can go out and about. I'm getting a 2-hour lunch break. What a time to be alive. Like, that's really how I felt in the moment. And then, of course, came the difficulty of sadly my grandpa passing away early on in this time. And that was obviously a hard part of it because I personally had never had a loss in the family until that point. And I'd never even been to a funeral. So there was a big part of me at the time thinking, oh man, like, I hope we even get a funeral. Like, what's that even going to look like? And we were obviously unsure at the time as a family. And then eventually we could have a funeral fairly soon after, but it was obviously a COVID funeral, which included social distancing and only a very small amount of close family able to go. So that was obviously a sad experience and not exactly the desired outcome, I think, for the family. But it was just, at the time you just had to sort of roll with the punches of what was ahead of you. So that was obviously a sad blip at the very beginning of everything. And I think that's where probably the seriousness of it did sink in for lots of us at that time. Because I'm pretty sure this is when they began, like, the death toll thing. Oh my God. That doesn't even seem like a real thing, but it was. I do remember being locked onto the news, and it was like a daily thing, wasn't it? Like, here's the death toll today. It's just going up and up and up. Like, there's a part of us that are all having this kind of low-key nice experience where we're back at home, we're with our families, we might just be living on our own, the sun is shining, some people are off work, woo! Nobody really knows what's going on. And then on the total opposite, you've got the endless death toll, some people, like myself, being impacted in your own family. And so it was just this real juxtaposition and just real mixed feelings going on at that time is what I recall. But I think because the entire globe and the UK as a nation were all going through it together, it did make it this is my personal experience. I think that made it feel less challenging and daunting because we all knew we were in it together. And obviously we all went through that phase, didn't we, of quiz nights and being on face call. What was that bloody app called? It was called like House Party or something. And do you remember it was an app where you would all join as a group and you could play games on it and that kind of stuff? And obviously there was a guy, there was a guy who ran this really huge national quiz night, didn't he? Do you guys remember doing that? And it was like a weekly thing and you would all tune in and it was like across the country people could join in on this quiz, and like I had like family quiz nights. Like we did so much of that stuff at the start of it because obviously that was our only way of connecting with humans, realistically, unless you were already in your family household. And I think there was just this communal feeling to that of like, we've got each other's back. And of course, with all the NHS clapping we were doing and clapping outside our windows and our doors, there was just this really almost comforting feeling that the whole nation was hugging each other and holding each other's hands. So I think that's why the first few months for the pandemic for me didn't really feel very traumatic in a sense. Even though we had sadness in it, I felt really supported and I didn't feel alone. I did not feel alone in those initial months. And I think, again, early on in the pandemic, I think we were all still thinking, this is going to be temporary. It'll be quite the blip. We'll be back to normal in like 6 months' time. And then I think this, for me, from my experience, is where the pandemic started to take a bit of a downhill turn. This is where I think the adrenaline and the community togetherness started to just drop off a little bit. And this is honestly, I think, where people started really losing faith at the UK government in particular because of how shambolically they were handling it. Then came all the scandals and people breaking rules and, oh, we only have lockdowns in this nation, but not in this nation. And if you live like 5 minutes across the border, then you can do that. But then things just started to become really messy, I feel, in the UK of how they were handling it. And all the different rules and regs, depending on where you were, felt really unfair. And then we had the whole thing in the summer, if you remember, called Eat Out to Help Out. What a sham that was. It was like, we need to support the economy, so we're going to loosen the restrictions out of this lockdown that we've just had you in for a few months. Get out for the summer. Have a great time. Now, coming from Wales and living in Wales at the same time, there was actually a lot of strictness in Wales compared to the rest of the UK. And I do remember that feeling like a real bummer at the time. I just remember thinking, well, that's not fair. Like, the rest of the UK get to do all this stuff. And if we go across the bridge, then we're allowed to do it. And literally, I recall that year, my birthday in July, I went and had my birthday meal with my mum and dad in the Cotswolds because it was the first, week of the summer or so where they'd introduced the Eat Out to Help Out scheme. And we were just thinking, well, we're allowed to drive there. Like, we're not allowed to go to England. So why don't we just go there and have a nice birthday meal? Because we can't do it in Wales. Like, that whole thing just did not make sense to me. So there was all these like grey areas and loopholes during that time. This is where I think like you could see the cracks in the entire management of the COVID pandemic, especially in the UK. Now, obviously, I can't speak for experiences in other parts of the world. I know that my friend Josie in Spain had like very different experiences in terms of curfews and the police being really strict on that. Actually, side tangent, if anyone is interested, I have got, maybe I will link it in the bios of all the platforms I upload this episode to, but in the first few weeks of the pandemic, me and Josie did actually make some like vlogs, like diary vlogs of our pandemic experiences. Because I felt like at the time I didn't have much to do. I was at home on my own. I've always been big on documenting and recording momentous moments and all the rest of it. And I just started making some little vlog styles of like, oh, here's what's happening and here's my experience of the pandemic. And she did a little episode for me of what life was like in Spain. So if you are curious about that, then check out the links in the bio. You can see my little mini series on that. I think it's like 4 episodes or something, but that was like helpful at the time because it kept me really productive. But yeah, so obviously, everyone's got different rules of what was going on in their country. But there was just something annoying about the UK where it just kind of felt like, look, if you're going to stick to these rules, then at least make it for everyone. But they were kind of justifying that like, well, we don't need them in this area because it's like less spreading of the virus here. But then, to be honest, inevitably, it didn't really make a difference because the virus would just come back around anyway. So it felt like a really pointless way of divvying the rules. And I think that's where people start to get pissed off because it was like, okay, this is getting a bit chaotic now and there's making no sense to any of it. And then the Eat Out to Help Out scheme was a complete farce anyway because it just rose the infection rate again because, shock, we're all out and about spreading out germs. Even though we're technically supposed to be wearing masks and technically supposed to be social distancing, but as we all know, not everyone was attending to those rules. So yeah, that was just when things got really weird. It was like we'd all gone past the phases of enjoying our little quiz nights and everyone was making banana bread and all the silly little things, right? And I guess this would have been around about really like winter time, right? Like autumn into winter, the end of 2020. I think this is where times were getting difficult for people. I mean, I would love to know, obviously, in the comments, just let me know, obviously, what your experiences were around about this time, because I guess for some people, maybe you were struggling at this point if you were furloughed. I mean, I can't imagine what it must have been like being out of work for so long with nothing to do. I would have lost my mind. Like, I was obviously living on my own at the time anyway, which was difficult enough even with a job at certain times. Like, I definitely felt a lot of loneliness, but I just can't imagine what that must have been like if you didn't have a job or things to keep you occupied in the day, and obviously everything's shut down and you're not really allowed to go out more than once other than going for your walk. So if you ever did experience that, like, please let me know in the comments. Like, I'd be really curious to know, what was that experience like for you? And this is the thing, isn't it, about pandemics and this whole chat is like, you could speak to 10 different people and they'd all have very different stories. There needs to be like a full blockbuster movie about the pandemic because it is just an insane moment in history, isn't it? So towards the end of 2020, this was also another sort of unique COVID experience for me, which was I actually had to have an operation. I had to have this operation basically where I removed half my thyroid, which was a pretty serious operation. And I'd been on like a waiting list for a little while. And honest to God, I thank my lucky stars for this timing because I think I was one of the last people who got into a cohort of operations just before Christmas of 2020. Because basically what happened was there was these big grand plans where Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, essentially was like, you can all be together for Christmas in certain bubbles. And everyone was probably really excited for that because for so many months now, a lot of people had been alone or not able to see their family as much. And then there was this prospect of like, we're all going to be reunited for Christmas. Everything's going to be great again. And then there was this whole drama really last minute where the government basically turned around and said, sorry, we're cancelling those plans now because the infections are too high. So you're not allowed to be in your bubbles anymore. Merry Christmas. I can imagine. Oh God, I can remember it so clearly because I just had my operation. I'm obviously a very fragile woman at this point. I was obviously living on my own. I'd had my operation. I did my quarantining pre-operation. And so there was this 2-week period of quarantining. Then I had to take a COVID test to ensure I did not have COVID. Thankfully, I didn't. Then I went in to have my operation. I was only staying there a night, so I came back the next day, and my family were actually looking after me post-operation because there's no way I could have done that by myself. So that was all planned and in place. My parents were comfortable with that. None of us had COVID and it was all fine. And I was going to be basically living with them for the next few weeks, maybe even up to 2 months, because it was timed during the Christmas break. I was going to be recovering for some time and would have needed support. So I remember coming home. I literally look like Frankenstein. I've got like a whole scar on my neck. I look awful. I can hardly talk because when you have that operation, your voice goes like really hoarse and croaky. I can eat liquid for like a week. It was the worst. It was the worst operation recovery experience I think I've ever had in my life. Would not recommend. But anyway, we're in the house and like I'm fragile. I've had no sleep for days. My mum, bless her, she's such like an empath. So she feels sad when I'm sad and we can feel our emotions. They're very high. And I just remember us being sat there watching the news. And then I think this announcement came from the government, like cancelling Christmas. And obviously for us, it wasn't a big deal necessarily because we were together. I think it did impact maybe the fact that we couldn't see maybe other relatives. I can't quite remember what happened in the end, but we just had a moment on the sofa where I was so upset and I was so drained. And I think maybe we were just having a little argument about nothing. And then I started crying and then my mum started crying at me crying and then we were just crying all together because not my dad, but like me and my mum were just crying because we were like, oh, it's just so depressing. They just cancelled Christmas and I just want everyone to be here and you've had a tough time with the operation. Ah! And it was just a full breakdown moment of like, this isn't a fun part anymore. Like the pandemic's not fun anymore. Like, that feels weird to say that, but like, remember when we were just having fun, baking banana bread and doing pub quizzes online and we didn't have to work for like, that was another world at that point. This is where pandemic life was just too much. And I think we were all very glad to get to the end of 2020 unscathed, just about. And so 2021, now I'm trying to figure out and remember really any timeline from this point onwards. The only real timelines that I can always clearly remember was 2020 because so many significant things happened in that year that I find easy to mark, like to earmark, you know? Whereas 2021 onwards feels weird to me because there was such a mixture of things we could and couldn't do during that time. Early on into 2021, I was still really not feeling tip-top from my operation. It took me a long time to recover from that off. So I don't recall winter being very eventful at all. I'm pretty sure when all that Christmas lockdown stuff happened again and the Christmas got cancelled, that winter was pretty rough. I think we all had to pretty much isolate, didn't we, during that winter? So I recall that not being a fun winter for the books. Not that I ever enjoy winter, but that one felt particularly bleak. And then I think there was a little bit of hope summertime of 2021, because I actually think this was the first time since going on that Barcelona trip in February 2020 that I was finally able to start considering a bit of travel. And I had missed travel so much during that time. Like, I'm a big advocate for holidays and travelling, and even if it's just 1 week a year for just a nice little sunbathe or a reset in Spain, like, I find that something that's really important to factor into my life just for my own mental health and to have breaks. So I think I went back to Spain at some point during this year, but it was under quite strict requirements. You had to do all this COVID testing to even be able to travel. It was definitely a bit of risky business, and you had to make sure you had this COVID specialist travel insurance just in case you couldn't travel. Spain obviously had quite a bit of strict rules compared to the UK actually at this time. Like, most of the stuff was still shut, but I guess on the plus side, at least you could have nice weather and sunbathe by a pool kind of vibes. I think I had a little holiday to Mallorca from my memory with my friend Josie. I think we met there. And then I do recall I actually had to do a COVID test to go back home as well. And I remember this being a bit of a risky move and thinking, oh, but what if I did get COVID when I was out there and then they don't let me fly? I basically had to take my work laptop with me to Spain as a contingency plan just in case I didn't make it home. It was a bit stupid, really, but I was so desperate for a holiday at that point that I was willing to take that risk. I just thought, well, I've got the travel insurance. If worst comes to worst, we can extend the stay and at least I'll have my work laptop there so I can work from there. But, thankfully that didn't happen. I didn't have COVID and I just travelled back as planned. Even just thinking about how faffy travel was, and obviously wasn't really doing it that much because of that reason. So then I guess, end of 2020, this is the thing. This is where I just am struggling to recall what life felt like, or when we even hit the point of it being a post-pandemic world. When did we officially end the pandemic? Was there did we announce it? When did UK pandemic end? I don't really remember what constituted the end of it. That's one part of it that I'm struggling to remember. Timeline of UK coronavirus lockdown. UK lockdown, March 2020 to March 2021. So was it just a year? Was that it? Surely not. Because I don't think that's true, because maybe the lockdown specifically, but there were still so many measurements in place for quite some time after. Oh, here we go. The legal requirement to wear face masks in England ended on the 27th of January 2022. See, it did go on for quite some time after, and that is kind of my memory. Yeah, I'm not going to lie, I was very glad when we finally got to that point where we didn't have to keep following every single little rule. I think I was feeling a bit, shall we say, cabin feverish at that point of oh God, I don't know how many more years we have to go on wearing masks and socially distancing and having to think of taking COVID tests if you ever want to travel and having to take out all these different... it was a real faff, wasn't it, at that point? So yeah, realistically, I guess if you go from February, March 2020, it was pretty much a 2-year ordeal, wasn't it? Full whack, actual measurements, actual real impacts on your everyday life was a full 2-year experience, which is a lot of time in someone's life, isn't it? I felt a bit robbed of my time in Cardiff during this period of life because I had only really recently moved to my new flat. I'd been there for maybe a year or so. I was a year into my new job at that time, was enjoying my job and was used to obviously office life and all the rest of it. And then that just abrupt nature and just plodding through the next 2 years. And then, before I knew it, I was pushing 30 and I was I've just basically missed out on the latter end of my 20s, which was a bit shit. And again, I can imagine there's so many categories of people in the world that had similar experiences. Imagine being a second and third year student in uni. Imagine you've just done your first fresher year on a campus with people, and then your second and third year, you're just at home. Imagine school years. Oh my God, there's just so many things, aren't there? Imagine retiring and being I retired. Oh, I can't do anything now. I'm just in the house. It is crazy how much life we lost during that time. And in the grand scheme of life, 2 years doesn't feel like a lot. But I think the traumatic length of that pandemic and obviously everything that we all went through as a globe is enough to make you feel like that lasted a lifetime, And then obviously, going into post-pandemic life, this is where I feel the world has certainly changed. Some of it for the good, some of it not so much. I'm personally of the opinion, as the working adult, that being in a hybrid remote world is absolutely a positive. I can't even fathom or imagine doing a 5-day-a-week office job anymore. That feels unnecessary at this point. And I'm really glad to have a more work-life balance going on there. It is nice to have some time in the week to see humans, to interact with colleagues, and then other days you can be at home, feel a little bit more relaxed in your own environment. I think that's good for us all and good for the soul. And just gives you a bit more flexibility in your life. It's kind of mad to think that offices and workplaces couldn't have done that sooner, considering actually, turns out we can just do these jobs at home. It's not that difficult. But then, of course, I think the fine balance is making sure that you are still interacting with humans. Like, I'll be honest, for the first few months of my work life, obviously being sent home, yada, 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 I didn't mind it. But I really started to struggle, I think, towards the first year of COVID and into the second year. It had been, nearly an entire year at this point of being basically a full remote worker, living on my own, not seeing colleagues at all. And I felt like I was really struggling with that at one point. I hated it. I was like, oh, this is so lonely and so boring. And even sometimes just the efficiency of trying to get stuff done and it feeling like things are taking longer because we're all having to wait for each other to go on calls and mesh. Oh, it was just irritating. It was never quite as simple and easy as like, oh, I can just swing my chair around to their desk and ask them a quick question. Like, everything felt a lot faffier. I do still think that exists in the working world. The quickness and efficiency of communication, I think, is quite poor when you work from home compared to when you're just in an office. But again, it's like, you give and you take. It's there's goods and there's some bad, there's some pros and there's some cons. I'm really glad that in this new job I've now joined, that I'm back to like a hybrid life, because I was basically full remote for the last 5 years and that got very boring very quick for me. So being back to a world with a bit more human interaction is really great, I think. I do think the negatives of the pandemic is people's social skills. I gotta be so real. Maybe it's because I'm just a bit of a social butterfly. I'm a little bit more extroverted in some senses. I feel confident in having conversations and talking. But I fear that humans, have drastically lost their social skills since the pandemic. And I mean, it's not a surprise, truthfully. People were secluded and reclused for a very long time. And I think that ultimately does do some form of mental damage to someone, doesn't it? Like, it impacts your brain in some way, shape or form. And I'm sure there's plenty of that currently being studied or to be studied. But people just became more anxious, didn't they? Like, I know even some people in my own life who have felt for a period of time that they haven't felt comfortable to go back out into the world. And maybe that's from fears of health, anxieties, or just because they got too used to being in their own company. But I think that's the sad part of it. And obviously we're feeling the fallout of that now with really like a mental health pandemic post-COVID. And I think that is very real. And like young people as well, I can't imagine how isolated young people probably would have felt during that time, especially if their school life was disrupted in that sense. At a certain age of your life, like the social aspect and learning that you have and developing in your brain is quite important at that time, isn't it? And for you to completely lose out on that, it's no doubt that must have a negative impact later down the line. So I think it's sad that like people seem to have lost their social skills. And if I'm being so real, even just on a basic level, like a big part of coming up to Manchester for me and a big challenge is like making new friends and making connections. And I'm not going to lie to you, I've had some difficulties there. And I've personally found that quite a lot of people are really incapable of communicating basic things. It's like people have just forgotten the art of like conversations and human emotion sometimes. And I'm absolutely convinced that comes back from the pandemic. Like, I swear people didn't used to be this useless before. So, I don't know, it's all very strange. I think obviously another negative really that we see now post-pandemic and for the UK post-Brexit life as well is the economy. Like, the economy was absolutely shattered from COVID, like, let's be real. So many industries obviously suffered during that time, some of them bouncing back, but I think there's a large swathe of industries that have not bounced back. For example, as I mentioned in the last episode, like nightclubs and hospitality, I think are really still struggling. I don't think the government has done enough to support money-wise to keep things going. And then on top of that, obviously, we've got the cost of living crisis. But I think it's probably fair to argue that has obviously changed a lot since pandemic, isn't it? Like people not going out as much, people not necessarily returning to the clubs. Now you've got the Gen Zers of today, sober curious, all the rest of it. So I feel like we're all feeling this aftermath and impact financially, aren't we? And I know there's like a multitude of reasons to add to that, along with the war in Ukraine and all the rest of it. But like, I think pandemic was probably the catalyst, truthfully, wasn't it? So I hope we see a world in where the economy prospers again in the next 10 years and we're not still struggling out here with the cost of living crisis and everyone's just trying to make ends meet. Like, it does feel like we're in tough times right now. But you know what? Honestly, there's a part of me that would take that over the tough times of pandemic days where we couldn't go places, because I don't think that's anything that we probably ever want to live through again. Let's hope so in our lifetime that we never have to experience that. But what a crazy time. Like, just trying to process the whole thing is mad. Like, I'm trying to think of a summary of words to define the pandemic, of what comes to my mind. And the only word I can ever keep saying is just crazy. Just what a crazy time. It just didn't feel real. And there's probably so many elements of it that I've forgotten about. There's probably multiple things I've forgotten to mention. But obviously, everything that I've just talked about is kind of the core stuff that sits in my memory from my own experiences. And on that note, we're going to end this episode, but thank you so much for listening to my rambles today. Thank you for any likes on the videos. Please do give it a share on your social pages. If you're not already, please hit that subscribe button or follow me on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And let me know in the comments, what was your takeaway experiences from your COVID life? Do you have words that summarise it? Feel free to comment away and let me know. But anyway, on that note, ladies and gents, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week, and I will catch you on the flip side. Bye, honeys.